I can't go into a shop that sells any kind of greenery without going and looking at what's on offer to see if I can turn something into a bonsai. And I was out at B&Q, I found these really cool lavenders. So let me walk you through what you need to do to take a cheap tree from a hardware store and turn it into a bonsai. And because I got two, we'll do it twice. Pull away all this dead foliage. Apply some thick wire. I just f***ed up. Now the first thing I did when I brought these two trees home was give them water because they're absolutely parched dry. There's a lot of dead foliage on the interior of the trees, so I think they've really been struggling in that shop, not getting enough water. I just left them for a couple of weeks, watering them well, and allowed them a little bit of time to recover from their dry spell. And you can see that they're doing quite well. They're pushing out these long shoots and got some flowering at the end. So I think it's time that we can work on them. Lavender isn't a species that I've worked with before, so I've done a bit of research on what to expect. There's a few things that I've taken away. First of all, the soil. When we're watering these, we want to keep them a bit drier than many other species of bonsai. If you keep their feet wet, then they're not going to do well. So we'll try and keep them on the drier side when we're watering. Another thing is they have very brittle branches, which is really important to bear in mind when we're wiring the tree. And I'll show you a few strategies on how to wire trees with brittle branches. And then finally, the growth habit of lavender is all about elongation. And as it elongates, you tend to lose foliage on the interior. So we're going to have to bear that in mind to keep pruning these back. Keep allowing light in the interior so we don't lose those inner branches and back budding that will be so important to build a bonsai. But with all that, let's do some bonsai. So the first thing you want to do when you're styling a bonsai is to do a general cleanup of the tree. And what we mean by that is taking away any dead foliage, pruning off any dead branches, and taking away any weak growth that's definitely not going to be part of the final design of the tree. In doing this cleanup, you're going to create space in the branches to better visualize what we're going to be working with, and it's going to familiarize you with the structure of the tree so that you can make better decisions about the front and the branching and everything else down the road. So it's a really important step that you shouldn't miss. Now, as I mentioned, these trees were really dry at the nursery. As a result, they've had a lot of desiccation of the leaves in the interior. So just by moving these branches aside, I can pull away all this dead foliage to create a bit of space and breathing room for the tree. I'm going to cut away the label, and I'm going to cut away this stake that they've got helping the tree to stand upright. That'll give us an idea of how stable the tree is, how able it is to stand on its own roots. But also it's ideally what I'm going to do is put some thick wire on the trunk to give it a bit more movement, and that should take on the role of stabilizing the tree away from this stake. There's a bit of wiggle on the roots, so we'll need to bear that in mind. It does seem strong enough to stand on its own feet, which is good. I'm being really careful as I go in here. I don't want to just come in wildly and rip everything out because there might be some viable shoots on the interior, and if there are, we really want to keep those growing because they could be very valuable for us. That's the cleanup done, and you can see it's night and day from where we started. We have a really good idea of the branching structure now. We'll easily be able to apply wire to this and just think of all the extra light that's going to get into the interior here and help the tree photosynthesize, create its food. So let me clean some of this crap out of the way, and we'll move on to the next thing, which is choosing a front. So choosing a front for a bonsai tree, there's a few things to consider. First of all, the base, probably the most important thing in my opinion. Looking where you can build a strong nabari, which is interesting to look at and gives the impression of stability for the tree. After you've looked at the base, look at the trunk line. What's the best angle for making the most of different pieces of movement in the tree? And then finally, you want to look at branching and special features on the tree. Where can we distribute these branches for a good front? And is there any special features like deadwood or interesting bark or anything like that on the tree? So there's no real special features on this tree. We've got branching options everywhere, so I'm not worried about that. Base and trunk line, I think, are where the real value of this piece of cheap material come in, because it has quite an interesting root spread, which would be great to emphasize. And there is some subtle movement in the trunk, which we can apply wire to, and it's still small enough that we can probably get a little bit of movement in to accentuate those angles. So we've got this strong root growing across here, which is a really good anchoring for the tree. One here and some more spreading down here. We also have this interesting root growing up and across. It is quite cool looking. It's but it's potentially something that might not fit with the design long term. Let's see what we've got round the back. So there's another root here. I can see it's partially buried. I'm going to take that back and crossing root on top. There's more roots here. But I think from this backside, we lose a lot of the visual impact of those big roots. And also there is a bit of a flaw in the trunk here. Where there was that tape tying the stake onto the tree, you can see it's girdled the trunk slightly. And it's a lot less visible from around here. Let's consider the trunk line. We want to try and get the most out of this angle here coming out, and we could change the planting angle a bit to help with that, but potentially pulling it down and then this curve here. So I think roughly here is going to be our best front. That's what we'll work with. So after choosing a front, the next thing I like to do is define the trunk line of the bonsai. And to do that, I'm going to apply some thick wire to bend this trunk and see if we can get a little bit more movement with it. I have to be very careful because it does feel brittle and I don't want to snap the trunk and kill the tree. But equally, this thing cost me £4.50. I want to make it a really good bonsai if I can. But if I push it too hard and I lose the tree, it's not too big of a loss. I'm going to use aluminium wire because it's easier to apply, which I think is really important when you're working with brittle trees. I have an old bit of wire here that I'm going to use. When you do bonsai as much as I do, wire can start to become expensive. And unlike copper wire, which work hardens, meaning copper wire, the more you bend it, the harder it gets, and it starts to become unusable. Aluminium wire you can reuse and reuse as much as you want. So you just have to put a bit of effort into straighten it out, and then you can reuse it. I'm from Aberdeen, and in Scotland, Aberdonians are renowned for being cheapskates, so there you are. Thank my upbringing for this. So what we want to do is stick the wire deep into the soil to give it its first anchoring point, and we're going to wire it around the tree, using one hand on the wire, and our other hand is going to keep the wire in close contact with the bark. And we want the angle of the wire to be about 60 degrees with each turn. Taking it off the turntable helps because it stops it spinning so much as you torque the wire. Okay. Just weave that through the branches for one final turn. Okay. So we want to accentuate the bends where they happen, and a good thing to do when you're working with brittle trees is, instead of just flat bending a branch, if you twist it when you bend, it increases the amount of bend you can put on a branch before it snaps. Now, I said I was going to root this cutting. Another thing you can actually do, and I'll use it for this video, is if you have bits of branches that you've cut off, you can test how brittle the tree is going to be. So if we just very little force there. I don't know if you can hear that popping, but that's it, a pop. Before it's properly snapped, that's some of the tissue breaking, and then boom, it goes without much bending. So that's how brittle this tree is, and that's how careful we need to be. But let's see how we get on. that's our first bend from the bottom. And then I'm going to bring it back towards us. I'm going to try and twist it round as we go. Good. And if I can, I'd like to bring this forward a little bit. There. Okay, so a bit more nice, interesting movement in the trunk. Next, I'm going to move on to some branch selection, decide which of these branches we want to include in the design and which ones we want to remove. I hadn't realised this when I'd done it, but clearly this bark is very fragile because I've rubbed off a whole section of it here. I'm hoping that won't do too much damage to the tree, but I'm going to need to be really careful when I'm working on the rest of the branches. Right, I'm going to cut off the tip of this thick wire. Stop it getting in our way, and then make some of the more obvious pruning decisions. It's important when you're creating a bonsai tree to make sure that at each junction on the tree you only have 2 branches and the trunk is included in those 2. And the reason for that is if you have a trunk and then 2 branches growing off the side of it, it's a bit weird, then you're going to get thickening where those two branches are coming out of the trunk. In here we've got 1, 2, 3 branches all growing from the same spot. So we're going to have to choose which ones of those we want to keep. Now the decision of which branches you want to keep is based on a few different factors. First of all, we want to think about what surrounding branching we have. So we have a nice branch here, a nice branch here. So if we're kind of keeping things symmetrical, we could opt to keep this one, or if we want to have more growth off on one side, we could opt to choose this one. If one side of your tree doesn't have any branching, then that's the side you would want to prioritize keeping. And then we also want to think about the branches themselves. So this branch is quite thick and well established, but it doesn't have any budding on the interior. This one is a bit thinner, a bit more malleable, and does have some buds that might grow, although it is a little bit weak. And then this one, again, a bit more malleable. We could add more wire and shape to this, but it's kind of coming off at a bit more of a funny angle. And it's a bit of an eye poker branch, as they say, coming straight towards the viewer from our desired front. So I think, with all that said, I don't like this big thick branch here, so I'm going to cut that off and then see where we're going to go next. Now, just behind this branch on the right, see we've got 1, 2, 3 all on the right hand side of the tree. I think we can afford to lose this one in the middle of those and then keep this one here to kind of fill a space. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to cut this wire back further because it's squashing this branch and also getting in the way of me cutting away the base of that other one. Now this wire is a lot less functional because I've cut it too short and it's come away from the trunk, which doesn't look nice, but that's because I did a bad job of putting it on in the first place, so we're going to have to live with it now. It's not the end of the world. So I think I'm going to make a big cut here. I think with this trunk line, we've got it coming up to the right, snakes back to the left, and then it would be interesting to have it come back to the right. And we have some branches here that are going off in that direction, so I'm going to use those to do it. I don't know how well we'll be able to create deadwood on this on a lavender, but I'm going to give it a shot and see what it turns out like. And that leaves us with a nice branch here, one growing up here. This one can kind of fill a gap in the middle, one at the back, and then we can try and create an apex over there. Let's do this deadwood work first before we wire the branches. I mostly do that because it can be really hard to create deadwood if there's wire in the way. Now, creating deadwood doesn't need to be difficult. It's not rocket science. And I think a lot of people overcomplicate it. Basically, just cut the branch in half and then tear it, and then snap it and tear it. And then that creates sort of a natural looking break. I think we actually don't even need scissors. We don't even need the pruning scissors for this because these are so brittle. So we can just snap those off, and then this bark's peeling away really easily. And that's all we'll do. Just take the bark off, leave it to weather, apply a deadwood preservative potentially to try and preserve the wood, but it's not too much of a feature here. I'm just doing it for a bit of fun. One of my favorite tools actually is a teaspoon, just a regular teaspoon for rubbing away bark. I don't think I need it now. I'm just going to use my nails and it's going to come away. Yeah, I don't know if I like that or not. I'm going to leave it. If it looks crap at the end, I'll just prune it out. Okay, now that it's done, I'm going to think about wiring. When you're wiring, it's critical that the wire has something to anchor to. When we did the trunk, we anchored it into the pot. And when you're wiring branches, it can help to wire two branches together. So I've got some more aluminium wire here. This is some new stuff. Let's apply it and move these branches into position. I generally just kind of hold up the wire roughly to the branch to get the right length. And where possible, start on the trunk to add a bit of stability. And then wrapping around the branch. Now, as before, it's super important that you use your offhand, the hand that's not holding the wire, to keep it tight onto the trunk or onto the branch. And I'm taking care to not crush any leaves underneath the wire because that's gonna kill the leaves and not look very pretty. This tree does smell nice. It's really relaxing. So with the wire on, I'm going to hold it in place here, and then snap. Now, when you're bending bonsai branches, you are going to snap some branches in your time because you want to try and create as much drama as you can in bonsai trees, and that means sometimes you will snap branches. What just happened there wasn't any of that. I just wasn't paying attention. I just wasn't thinking enough about how brittle these branches were. And I snapped it. The other thing to bear in mind is if you do have a snap, it doesn't mean the branch is going to die. A lot of species of tree can tolerate a branch snap up to 50, sometimes even 70% of the branch thickness can snap and it might still survive. So if that happens, what you can do if you really need to salvage that branch is to apply some cut paste and seal the wound and then see how the branch does over time. Now, this is a big break. I think this branch is going to die, honestly. But we do have a bud right behind it. This is behind the break and it's going to survive. So what I'm going to do is just cut off the broken branch. Leave that bud here. And so we can still have a bit of a branch growing from this bud. Right, onwards, but I'm going to be careful. Okay, I've wired in a bit of movement into this branch. I've put the bends at the points where other branches are coming off, so you leave branchlets on the outside of bends. And I'm now contemplating how long I should leave this branch. It does have some good interior buds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what I'm going to do is prune off the tip of this growth to try and focus the tree's energy onto the interior buds to build out that branching. Okay, let me see. I want this one kind of in the middle. Yeah. So there we had a snap. As I was moving it, it had a slight snap, but it's not a big break. That's okay. That's nothing to worry about. And that's a sign that we've bent it as much as we can. It's time to back off. Snap. Okay. Right. I mean, that's about as much as I dare do with this one. Not entirely happy with it. A bit of a scrappy effort. Had a lot of snaps. Foliage is looking messy, but I think the best thing to do for this tree is to leave it in the garden, let it grow. I'll transfer it to a bonsai pot in the spring. I'll give it some nice free draining soil to improve the root system. And then in a year's time, we'll come back and revisit what's happened to the tree, see how it's responded to this first styling and develop it from there. So that's tree number 1. Let's get the next one in. Okay, tree number 2. As before, I'm going to start by clearing away dead foliage, generally tidying up the tree and seeing what branching we've got to work with. There's no particularly strong base on this tree. I think the nabari of it is probably buried beneath the soil line, but I'm not too keen to disturb the soil just now. So I think we'd just pick our front based on the trunk line. Nice little curve here, and then a more gradual curve over here. So I'll probably choose this as my front. As before, I've got some recycled aluminium wire, but before I stick this in wire at the trunk, we have in the base here a lot of roots that are coming from quite high up the trunk and diving down into the soil, and they're not going to make for a good nabari. The gap between the root and the soil makes them feel quite unstable. So I'm going to prune those out now before the tree becomes dependent on them, and I'm just going to trust that there's bigger roots underneath the soil that will take over from those. It's a small gamble when you don't know the root system of a tree, but as before, it's a really cheap piece of material, and I want to make it good. So I'm gonna roll the dice on decisions like this. Okay, now I'm gonna wire the trunk. So anchoring the wire into the pot. Putting it in as deep as it can go, and then holding it tight with this hand and then letting this hand move the wire to start with. And you'll notice I'm moving this hand up the wire as we go further round and round to maintain stability of that wire. Okay, that's good. Now I'm going to see if I can, first of all with this bend, make that a bit more exaggerated. I haven't heard any pops yet, so I'm going to try and go for a bit more. Okay, that feels enough. Let's not get greedy. Now, got a natural curve here, so again I'm going to try and exaggerate that natural curve. We've got a bit of movement into the trunk, and that's about as much as I dare to try for. Right, next I'm going to look at some of the branches. Let me get this wire out of the way. You see, again, we got these two branches originating from the same point. And what we did last time was to prune a branch off and then do a bend. But as we saw, branches can snap quite easily. So I'm going to be a bit more sensible this time and do what I should have done before. And I'm going to do my bends first. And when I have a branch successfully in its new position, then I can prune off the other one that I won't need. But if I'm bending and one of them snaps, I'll have a backup that I can return to and use instead, so we don't end up losing all the branches on the tree. So let's give it a shot. Okay, let's try a bend. All right, got a branch coming down and in position. To mark that success, I'm going to prune off this other one. And this branch there, a little pop means we've done all we can with that. Now you may have noticed with this tree, I'm going for a different approach than I did last time. Last tree I went for the branches moving upwards and outwards, as is more natural for the species that we're working with. But with this one, I want to go for a more traditional bonsai design. So I'm going to have the branches coming down and creating these flat pads. Now this downward growing branch, we're not going to need it. It's growing in the wrong direction, so prune that one off. And then this strong growth off the top, again, it's going to grow too aggressively compared to the rest of the tree. So I'll prune that out too. I'm going to reduce these branches back because they're a bit coarse and aggressive, and I can see what looks like. Ooh, a spider made me jump. I don't like spiders. So I'll prune those back, and then I'm going to take this wire out to tip as well. Okay, so some more pruning decisions. This really strong branch growing off the top of here, that's going to take all the energy and just thicken up a lot. So I'm going to take that off. And this branch feels very long without much ramification close to the base. I don't think it's going to be very helpful. And instead, this one, if we could bend that one down into that space, that could be nice. This one's definitely not. I'm going to make the call and get rid of that. We have this one at the back, which we kind of screwed up already, but I think we'll be okay. Bring back strong growth. More spiders, jeez. Already got 2 extending shoots in here. I'm actually going to cut back to those. Yes, there's this one here. 2 shoots. So we're going to have some nice ramification on this. I just up. I went for one more final tweak and I snapped it. Yeah, that was never going to live after that. Well, it's okay. We left 2 other branches here. You know what? I think I'm never going to... These are too vertical to get them to angle downwards. And if they don't match the same downward angle in the design, they're going to look completely weird. So I'm actually going to prune these out. Which is a shame, but they're not going to make any sense. The reason I feel okay doing that is because we have these 2 branches here that are going to come down and fill that space anyways. So I think we'll be fine. Okay. So that leaves this one, which we can hopefully bring down in here. This is going to form the apex. And then these little ones come down. Okay. There's a first little pop. Nothing significant snapped there. I'm going to change to where I'm bending. Oof, that's already going. That's it gone. It's not a bad break. That'll probably heal. Probably. Okay. I'm gonna get at the central shoot to encourage these to grow. Okay. That's all the branches wired into position. Final decision has to be made on the apex. We've got 2 options. We could bring this branch back over to the left. Currently it's kind of dead straight over the base, so we could bring it to the left in line with this first curve, or bring it over to the right in line with the second curve. And bringing it over this way adds more asymmetry to the design, makes it's all moving off in one direction. Moving it back kind of keeps it more stable. I think I'm gonna go for it over. Am I? Ooh, that feels a lot. Okay, I'm not sure I like that. I'm gonna try. Yeah, that feels a bit better. Okay, that feels like a bit better. So we come up, right, left, right. We get an extra change in direction there. And the final move is going to be to bring this thing down back here. There we are. I have to say I'm a lot happier with the second one than the first one. I had a lot of snaps, a lot of breakages, but by leaving more branches on to begin with, it meant that we could cope with the losses as we went. The plan is going to be the same. I'm going to leave it to respond to this styling, probably repot it in the spring, and then rework it late next summer if it's doing well. I have to say I've learned a massive lesson today, and that lesson, I think that lesson is I don't like wiring lavender. If you enjoyed this and you're not subscribed, then feel free. We've got more videos just like this one. And if you want to watch one now, just click right here.